Are you out of your damn mind, Maya? Eating garbage? What the hell is wrong with you? Calvin Hart's voice roared through the cold stainless steel kitchen like a thunderclap. Maya William froze. She was on her knees near the trash bin, her back hunched in panic, fingers still clutching a half-eaten turkey sandwich wrapped in crumpled wax paper. Her body trembled. The sandwich dropped from her hands, hitting the floor with a dull, pitiful thud. "I trusted you in my house," Calvin barked, taking a hard step forward. His shoes echoed across the tiles like a gavel. "You have access to everything, my office, my rooms. And this is what I find you doing? First food. What next? Jewelry? Cash?" Maya's head jerked up, stunned. "No, Mr. Hart the First. I wasn't stealing. Don't play innocent with me," he snapped, eyes blazing. "God knows what else you've helped yourself to while I wasn't looking." Behind him, two kitchen workers murmured, "She's been acting weird for weeks." Another hissed, "Maybe she's been stealing. I always thought she was too quiet." The whispers sliced through the room like knives. Tears sprang into Maya's eyes, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She tried to stand, but her knees wobbled and she sank back down. Her face flushed, her voice cracked. "I swear, sir, I would never steal from you," she whispered. "I wasn't trying to take anything. I was just hungry." Calvin scoffed. "Hungry? You live in a mansion and get paid better than most hotel managers. Don't insult my intelligence." Her lips trembled. "I haven't eaten properly in 3 days." He froze. The words hung in the air. "I've been skipping meals," she continued softly, her voice raw. "I send my paycheck to my mother in South Carolina. She's in the hospital. Heart condition. No insurance. I keep only enough for the bus and some essentials. I didn't plan to. I was dizzy, and the sandwich was clean. It wasn't touching anything else, please. I'm so sorry." Calvin's eyes flicked to the trickle of red running down her arm. For a moment, something flickered hesitation, but his jaw clenched again. "You should have thought of that before sneaking around in my kitchen." Maya's knees buckled. She crouched lower, covering her arm with one hand, trying to steady her breathing. Around her, the staff's whispers grew louder, a murmur of suspicion, disapproval, judgment. She closed her eyes. And in that second, the noise of the kitchen faded, replaced by another memory: fluorescent lights in a foster home, hands slapping away a stale sandwich, someone calling her garbage girl. She remembered being 15, hiding crackers in her pockets, being caught and shamed in front of everyone. She had promised herself it would never happen again. Yet here she was. "I can't lose this job," she said hoarsely. "Please, Mr. Hart, I'll clean everything. I'll work double shifts. Please." Her voice cracked again, like a child's. He turned on his heel. "Clean this mess up, and stay out of the damn trash." His tone was colder than the marble floor beneath them. The staff parted silently as he left, no one daring to touch Maya, no one offering a cloth for her arm. Upstairs, in his office, Calvin stood at the window, the echo of her plea still ringing in his ears. Wait, before we continue, if this story touched your heart, please hit subscribe. It truly encourages us to bring you more powerful stories. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know our amazing viewers around the world. He had thrown something. He had drawn blood. He told himself it was an accident, a reflex, but his hands still trembled. Outside, on the stone patio below, 2 sparrows pecked at crumbs. He watched them, remembering a time when he had been the one scrounging for food, invisible to everyone. His calendar pinged Chicago investors waiting on Zoom. He sat down, straightened his tie, smiled on cue, but all he could see was Maya on the kitchen floor, bleeding, apologizing for being hungry, and the murmured accusations circling her like vultures. The cut on Maya's arm had crusted into a dull, angry red line. She wrapped it in tissue from the pantry, careful not to stain the white sleeve of her uniform any further. Her movements were robotic now, efficient, practiced. Clean the floor, toss the sandwich, wash her hands. She could still feel their eyes on her, even though the kitchen was empty now. The voices hadn't stopped, not even as she'd scrubbed the tiles where she had knelt. "She's been stealing, I just know it. I saw her pocketing something last week. Always quiet ones. They know how to hide things. Lies. but lies spoken in low tones, with conviction, could spread like mold. She moved to the laundry room next, folding the towels with mechanical precision. The rhythmic slap of cotton calmed her just enough to hold her thoughts in place. But behind every movement, her mind whispered memories being 13 and accused of stealing lip balm from a pharmacy she couldn't even afford to walk into. Being 17 and searched at a department store because her jacket looked too big. Now 29, working in a millionaire's home, and still they saw her as less than trustworthy. When she passed by the mirror near the linen closet, she caught a glimpse of herself. Eyes hollow. Cheeks gaunt. She hadn't eaten a full meal in 72 hours. Maya walked past Mrs. Carroll in the hallway without making eye contact. The older woman glanced at her bandaged arm but said nothing. Just a tight nod. It was worse than pity. It was silence. Upstairs, Calvin Hart sat in his home office, but his attention had long since abandoned the glowing numbers on the investment report. The voice of the Chicago investor droned on through the speaker's projections, revenue forecasts, quarterly margins, but Calvin heard none of it. All he could see was Maya's eyes, wide with shame and pleading, and the blood, the red flash on her brown skin, the sound of crystal hitting tile. He had thrown it. Jesus. He muted the call and leaned back in his chair, one hand rubbing his face. Get it together, he muttered to himself. You were angry. She was stealing. Or was she? He pulled up her file on his tablet. Maya William. Hired 6 months ago. No disciplinary issues. No write-ups. All her references were glowing. Background check. Clean. Education. GED, and some community college. Experience. Housekeeping. Elder care. Nothing stood out except maybe the part about sending her paychecks to South Carolina. He clicked into the payroll logs. 90% of her monthly earnings were wired to a medical facility down there, Palmetto County Regional Hospital, a private institution. He frowned. His own staff barely noticed her. But here she was, working herself into the ground, bleeding in his kitchen, and sending her money to a place most people couldn't afford aspirin from. A soft knock at the door. Come in, he said, expecting his assistant. But it was Mrs. Carroll. She closed the door behind her. Her face was unreadable, but there was a quiet tension in her shoulders. Mr. Hart, she said carefully, if I may speak freely. Of course. She folded her hands in front of her. The staff are talking. About Maya. He looked up tight-lipped. She's not a thief, Mrs. Carroll said plainly. She's not lazy. She's not sneaky. I've worked here for 12 years. I've seen all kinds of people come and go. That girl's never once stepped out of line. Calvin was silent. She's been skipping meals, sending money home. I didn't know the details, but I suspected it. She never complains. Never asks for anything. Her mother's sick, he said quietly. Mrs. Carroll nodded. You didn't see how she begged you, sir. Not for money. Not even for forgiveness. Just for the right to stay and clean, to work for her dignity. He flinched inwardly. She's in pain, Mr. Hart, and she still gets up every morning before the Sunday. You don't owe her sympathy, but you owe her the truth. At least find out what's real before letting everyone poison her name. Calvin didn't respond. Mrs. Carroll turned to leave, then paused. You always say you built your empire on knowing value when others overlooked it. Don't let your house forget what that means. He sat in silence long after she left. That night, Maya sat alone in the small servants' quarters tucked behind the east wing. Her dinner, if one could call it that, was 3 saltine crackers and lukewarm tea. She nibbled them slowly, savoring every grain. Her arm ached. The bandage was loose. She pulled out her phone, cracked at the corner, and read her mother's last message again. Heart is acting up. Doctor says another surgery. I'm scared, baby. But I'll be okay. I have faith. Faith. Maya blinked away tears. She had been holding on for months, stretching every dollar, hiding hunger, silencing pain. But after today, she wasn't sure how much more she could take. The sound of footsteps outside made her stiffen. Was someone coming to fire her? A shadow passed her window, then silence again. She curled up on her cot, knees to chest, and whispered aloud, not to God, not to her mother, but to herself. I just need one more week. Just one more. But even she wasn't sure she believed it anymore. If you feel for Maya, hit like and comment where you're watching from. Someone nearby might be watching this story too. The morning came in gray, dragging clouds across the Connecticut sky like a heavy curtain. Rain misted the mansion's windows, drawing trails that glided slowly down the glass. Maya awoke before the sun, her limbs stiff, her body aching not from sleep, but from hunger and bruised pride. She touched the bandage on her arm gently. The wound had clotted, but the ache was deeper than skin. It pulsed with every memory of yesterday, the way Calvin's voice had lashed through her. The sting of judgment in every staff member's stare. And worst of all, the moment she'd felt small again, like the world had already decided who she was, and her story didn't matter. She dressed in silence, smoothing out her wrinkled uniform. No. If you're still here and enjoying the story, we'd love your support. Take a second to hit subscribe. It really means a lot. No makeup, no earrings, just her name tag and a quiet prayer that no one would speak to her today. In the grand dining room, breakfast was being laid out as usual: fresh croissants, fruit platters, eggs Benedict under silver domes. Maya entered from the side door, head low, prepared to keep to the shadows. But as she reached for a dust rag from the cart, she heard it. She should have been fired yesterday. She's probably still stealing. Two maids whispering by the entryway. Maya turned slightly, saw them glancing at her, then looking away with smug expressions. She got blood on the counter too. Nasty. Maya felt her chest tighten. The shame was alive again, curling under her ribs. She turned away, focusing on polishing the banister. Every swipe of her cloth was a deflection, a shield. You know what he said? One whispered, that she was eating trash, like a raccoon. Laughter, sharp, cruel. Maya's hand trembled. She bit her lip so hard it stung. Is there a problem? The voice wasn't hers. It was Mrs. Carroll's. The older woman stood behind the whispering maids, arms folded, gaze like steel. The women fell silent immediately. Gossip has a funny way of turning on the speaker, Mrs. Carroll said evenly. You may want to clean your own corners before judging someone else's. The women dispersed. Maya didn't look up. She couldn't. That afternoon, Calvin Hart stood in the security office, arms crossed as he watched grainy black and white footage rewind. Rewind again, he said. The technician nodded, tapping keys. There it was. 2 days ago. 9:37 p.m. Maya in the staff kitchen, holding a bowl of soup. She looked around, then poured the soup back into a container and placed it in the fridge. A post-it on top. For Mr. Hart, reheated perfectly. Calvin stared at the screen. Play the next day. Maya entered again, opened the trash bin, pulled out the untouched sandwich, still sealed. She sniffed it, paused, then sat down on a stool and unwrapped it slowly like it was something sacred. Calvin let out a slow breath. She wasn't stealing. She was starving. The tech said nothing. Later that day, Calvin called his assistant, Drew. Get me everything you can on Palmetto County Regional Hospital, he said. Billing records, recent patient list. I want to know who Maya William is sending her paycheck to and why. Drew paused. Sir, are we within our rights to? She works in my house, Calvin said coldly. I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking for answers. By evening, the documents were on his desk. Patient, Gloria William. Condition, advanced congestive heart failure. Uninsured. Bills totaling $84,000. Next procedure. Cardiac catheterization, 10 days away. Attached was a note from a nurse. Patient's daughter is primary payer. Funds arrive in small weekly payments. Very committed. Declined social services, says they'll manage. Calvin leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. No theft, no deception, just sacrifice. He thought of his own mother, cold, distant, but alive. How he'd never had to fight for her like this. Downstairs, Maya wiped down the baseboards in the hallway. Her knees ached, her stomach cramped. She had stretched a boiled egg over both breakfast and lunch. Mrs. Carroll approached quietly. There's a dinner tonight, she said. Mr. Hart is hosting 2 investors. You'll help plate and clear. Maya nodded. Carroll's gaze softened. If they talk down to you, keep your eyes up. You don't owe them your silence. Maya gave a faint smile. Yes, ma'am. At 7 p.m., the dining room sparkled with candlelight and mahogany polish. Calvin sat at the head of the table, dressed in navy, sipping a glass of Merlot. His guests, two loud, overconfident men from New York, barely noticed Maya as she moved quietly around the room, pouring wine, delivering starters. Until one made a comment. "Is that your maid?" He chuckled, eyes flicking to Maya's figure. "Man, you keep your help looking sharp." Calvin's jaw tightened. Maya froze, halfway through setting down a plate. Calvin's voice cut through the room like ice. "That's Miss William. She's the household operations lead." The guest blinked, confused. "Oh, sorry. You thought wrong," Calvin said. "Eat your food." Maya's hand trembled slightly. She didn't speak. But her eyes flicked up for the first time in days and met Calvin's. Something passed between them. Not forgiveness. Not understanding. But a shift. For once, she wasn't just background. The rain had stopped by morning, but the sky still wore a heavy gray veil. The mansion, usually so full of silence and purpose, felt different, slower, uncertain. The previous night's dinner had left ripples in the atmosphere. Maya felt it as she moved through the halls. Whispers now stopped when she entered a room, glances darted away faster. No one dared speak her name out loud anymore. She didn't know exactly what Calvin had told them, only that something had changed. She clung to that thread while working through her usual rotation, dusting the library shelves, straightening sofa cushions, restocking hand towels, but her body was starting to falter. The ache in her belly had deepened into a sharp pinch. Her legs were slow. Her arms felt like they were dragging weights with each movement. By mid-afternoon, she was cleaning the stair railings, trying to ignore the pulsing in her head. She crouched to reach the lowest step, and when she stood up, the room tilted slightly. Her vision dimmed, tunneled, then returned. She blinked, shook it off. "Just keep moving," she whispered. "Almost there." She climbed up to the third step, cloth in hand. Then the buzzing in her ears started. The walls pulsed in and out of focus, like a heartbeat too close. Her breath hitched. The cloth slipped from her fingers. Her knees buckled. And then nothing. A dull thud echoed through the grand hallway. Moments later, Mrs. Carroll, carrying a basket of linens, turned the corner and dropped it instantly. "Maya, She rushed forward, kneeling beside the young woman crumpled against the staircase, her skin cold, her breathing shallow. "Call Mr. Hart now," she shouted toward the butler at the end of the hall. "Get the doctor." Within minutes, Calvin was by her side, face pale, eyes wide. He had never seen Maya like this, so still, so fragile. "Is she breathing?" he asked. "Yes," Carol answered, "but faintly, and she's burning up." The house's private physician, Dr. Nielsen, arrived 10 minutes later, huffing as he knelt to check her vitals. "Blood sugar's dangerously low," he muttered, shining a light into Maya's eyes. "She's dehydrated, malnourished." Calvin clenched his fists. "You mean she fainted from hunger?" Dr. Nielsen nodded grimly. "How long has she been like this?" "I don't know," Calvin admitted. "She never said anything." Mrs. Carroll spoke up. "She doesn't say when she's hurting." "Never has." They carried her to the guest suite. Calvin paced in the hall, phone clutched tightly in hand, but he wasn't texting, wasn't scrolling. He was remembering. Her apology, her begging, the bruises on her arm, the damn sandwich, and how he'd watched her collapse like she weighed nothing at all. Hours passed. Dr. Nielsen left instructions: electrolyte fluid, soup, rest. Calvin sat outside her door most of the evening. When she finally stirred, it was nearly midnight. Maya's eyelids fluttered open. She blinked against the soft lamplight, trying to sit up, but her body wouldn't listen. "You're okay," Calvin said from the chair beside the bed. "You're in the guest room. You fainted." Her throat was dry. I'm sorry. Don't." His voice was quiet. "Stop saying sorry." She looked at him, then really looked. There was something in his face she hadn't seen before. Not anger, not pity, but a heaviness. "I should have asked you sooner," he said. "About your mother, about everything." Maya turned her head away. "It wasn't your problem." It became mine the second you collapsed on my stairs. He hesitated. Why didn't you tell someone? Because people like me don't get to explain, she said flatly. We just get replaced. The silence between them stretched. Calvin sat back, pressing his fingers together. I looked up the hospital, he admitted. Palmetto County. Your mother's condition. The bills. I saw it all. Maya's eyes flicked to his, alarmed. I didn't mean to invade your privacy, he added quickly. I needed to understand. She swallowed. She's all I have left. I know. Another pause. I know what it's like to have nothing, Calvin said almost to himself. I wasn't born into this. I used to live in a car. I ate granola bars from gas stations. I hustled my way into college. No help. No backup. Maya's eyes softened, but she said nothing. That's why I'm angry with myself, he said. I should have seen it, but I was too busy thinking like a businessman and not like a human being. The clock on the wall ticked softly. I'm going to cover your mother's medical expenses, Calvin said suddenly. All of it. The surgery, the follow-ups. Maya gasped. No, you can't. I can. And I will. Tears filled her eyes. I don't want charity. It's not charity, he said gently. It's justice. She broke then, shoulders shaking, silent tears sliding down her cheeks. For the first time in a long time, Maya cried not from pain, but from the terrifying release of being seen. He handed her a tissue. She took it with trembling fingers. Calvin stood slowly. Rest now. We'll talk more in the morning. As he left the room, he glanced back. She had curled into the blanket, eyes still open, watching him as if afraid this was all a dream. He closed the door gently behind him. Sunlight filtered through the linen curtains of the guest suite, soft and gold. It crept across the room like a quiet promise, no thunder, no cruelty, just light. Maya opened her eyes slowly, expecting to feel that familiar emptiness in her stomach, that gnawing fear in her chest. But instead, she felt warmth. The sheets beneath her were Egyptian cotton. A tray rested on the table near the window soup. Toast. Orange juice. Her bandaged arm had been redressed neatly. A folded note lay beside the tray. Eat first, we'll talk later, CH. For a long moment, Maya didn't move. The night before came back in pieces, Calvin's voice in the dark, the way his expression had shifted, the way he'd said, justice. But justice always came with a cost, didn't it? Was this real, or just the eye of the storm? She took the toast with careful hands, chewing slowly. Every bite awakened a kind of guilt that had etched itself into her bones. She'd survived on so little for so long that kindness now felt like a threat. But when the warmth hit her stomach, tears welled up. She didn't cry. She simply closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you," to no one in particular. Calvin sat in his office, staring at his inbox. Contracts, investor questions, property reports, all urgent, all blinking for attention. But he ignored them. Instead, he reviewed the payment confirmation on his screen. Palmetto County Regional Hospital. Amount, $89,650. 0. Paid in full. Patient, Gloria William. He leaned back, folding his arms behind his head. For a man who dealt in billions, the money meant little. But the act? That was heavier. He couldn't remember the last time he'd done something without expecting a return. Mrs. Carroll entered with her usual grace, placing a mug of coffee on his desk without asking. She ate, she said. All of it. Good. Calvin replied quietly. She's still shaken, but better. Mrs. Carroll hesitated. Mr. Hart, you didn't just help her. You shifted the way the whole house sees her. I looked up. Too late? No, she said firmly, but just in time. Later that morning, Maya stood at the threshold of the office. She wore a clean uniform, her posture straighter, but still cautious. Come in, Calvin said, rising from his chair. She entered slowly. Her eyes flicked to the bookshelves, the awards, the black and white photo of a young Calvin with his first real estate project behind him, a run-down duplex in Detroit. She remembered passing that frame dozens of times and never daring to look at it. I wanted to thank you, she began. You don't have to, he said, gesturing for her to sit. She did carefully. You paid for my mother's treatment. That's not nothing. No? he agreed. It's not. But I owed you that much. For what I didn't see. For what I assumed. Maya nodded. I know what I look like to people like you. Calvin frowned. What do you mean? I'm a black maid in a rich white man's house. I'm not stupid, Mr. Hart. I see how they look at me. How you looked at me. Even if you didn't mean to. He didn't argue. You're right. I didn't want to be a victim, she said. But I didn't want to be invisible either. So I kept my head down and did the work. That's how I survived. Ben. Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. I'm tired of surviving. He leaned forward. Then don't. Let me help you live. She studied him. Why the change? He hesitated, then said, because I forgot who I used to be. I forgot what it felt like to be hungry. Alone. Dismissed. Maya exhaled. That's easy to forget when you live in glass towers. He smiled faintly. That's why I'm breaking one. A beat passed. I'm promoting you, he said. Effective immediately. You'll be the new head of estate operations. Higher pay, full benefits, and a seat at the management table. Maya's eyes widened. What? You've earned it, he said simply. And this time, I see you. She blinked fast, lips parting, but the words wouldn't come. Not right away. Then, thank you. He nodded. One more thing, she added, standing slowly. Please don't protect me like I'm weak. I've fought too hard for that. I'm not protecting you, he said. I'm investing in you. No, she smiled barely, but enough. Then I won't let you down. As she walked out, the staff in the hallway parted, not in avoidance, but in quiet respect. Whispers still followed her, but they carried a different tone now. Not suspicion, not cruelty, curiosity. That evening, Maya sat on her cot, though now she had a real mattress coming in the morning and video called her mother. Gloria's face appeared on the cracked screen, her hospital gown loose but her smile wide. Maya, baby, you look brighter. I feel brighter, she said softly. Her mother's eyes narrowed. Did something happen? Yes, Maya said. A lot of things, but mostly, someone finally listened. They spoke for 10 minutes, sharing small joys, talking about the future. When Maya hung up, she didn't feel fear. Not tonight. Outside, Calvin walked the grounds alone. The moon hung low. A breeze passed through the trees. He had more questions than answers still about himself, about what came next, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like the cold man on top of the world. He felt human again. In the days that followed, the estate moved with a different rhythm. The silence that had once smothered Maya now seemed to part as she passed. Not entirely out of warmth, some eyes still narrowed, some whispers still hid behind polished smiles, but there was caution in their tones now. She was no longer the easy target. Her new title, head of estate operations, was spoken aloud, reluctantly at first, then gradually with recognition. Calvin had made the announcement himself during the weekly staff briefing. His voice firm. His message clear. From now on, Miss Maya William answers directly to me. Her decisions carry my authority. Some, like Mrs. Carroll, had beamed with pride. Others had barely disguised their bitterness. Among them was Vanessa, the former assistant housekeeper, who had silently assumed she'd be next in line for the promotion. Her eyes had burned with a barely concealed rage when Calvin read the announcement, and she wasn't alone. Discontent, Maya realized, didn't vanish, it merely slipped underground. Still, Maya kept her head down, heart steady, and work flawless. Each morning began before sunrise. She supervised kitchen schedules, organized pantry rotations, refined cleaning routines, and introduced efficiency logs. Under her guidance, waste dropped by 30% in the first week. She implemented a rotating rest schedule for the maids, eliminating the silent exhaustion everyone had previously accepted as normal. The staff didn't say thank you, not yet. But they followed her lead. That was enough. But one morning, as Maya passed through the wine cellar on her inspection round, she noticed something odd. The floor near the storage racks was slightly damp. She bent down, fingers brushing a cold, sticky patch that trailed along the concrete. Red, not wine, something thicker, sweet, syrupy. She stood quickly and scanned the room. Nothing else out of place. Yet, That afternoon, the kitchen reported that an entire crate of gourmet preserves cherry, fig, and blackberry was missing. Maya documented it, quietly, professionally, no alarms. But that night, she found something else. A torn receipt tucked behind the break room coffee machine. A signed order for luxury pantry goods, addressed to a delivery service but not under the estate's usual vendor. She noted the name on the order, V.R. Vanessa. The next morning, Calvin noticed Maya lingering near the entrance of his office. "Come in," he said, setting down his coffee. "You look like you've found something." I think someone's been moving estate goods out the back door," she said, voice low, steady, without clearance. He straightened. "Proof? I have some. Not enough to confront yet. But I wanted you to know." His brows lifted. "Why tell me first?" "Because you trusted me with this house," she said, "and I'm not going to let someone poison it from within." Calvin nodded slowly, respect deepening in his eyes. "Follow the trail," he said, quietly. "Don't rattle her yet. But if she's stealing from me, I want to see it myself." Maya nodded. "Understood." She turned to leave. "And Maya," he added. "Yes? You're doing good work." She paused, her heart beating faster than she liked to admit. "Thank you." Meanwhile, word of Calvin's softening began circulating outside the house as well. Some of his board members questioned the unusual hospital donation he'd made. Others raised eyebrows at the rapid change in internal staff hierarchy. "You're making personal decisions in a business space," said Marshall Green, a longtime investor, during their quarterly call. "I'm making ethical decisions," Calvin replied, "which last I checked is still allowed in my company." Green didn't push, but the tension hung in the air like a storm cloud. Calvin ended the call early and stood at the window, watching Maya walk across the courtyard, clipboard in hand. She wasn't like anyone he'd worked with. She didn't play the game. She didn't hide behind ambition. And yet, her integrity was the most strategic asset he'd ever encountered. And now someone was threatening that. Later that night, Maya crept into the wine cellar again. This time, she brought a small flashlight and a notebook. She followed the trail, not the syrup it had been cleaned, but other signs. A shifted tile, a thin piece of tape marking a corner, and finally, behind a false panel, an extra crate. Empty. She opened it slowly and found plastic bags, labels peeled off, a burner phone taped to the side. Someone was selling estate goods and using burner accounts to reroute payments. She photographed everything, logged the time, documented the model of the phone. When she turned around, she nearly screamed. Vanessa stood at the door, arms crossed. "Well," she said, "that didn't take long." Maya straightened, every instinct on edge. "You've been stealing," she said flatly. "And you've been playing the boss's favorite," Vanessa sneered. "Guess we both have our sins. You've been rerouting luxury goods to private vendors. That's not just unethical, that's theft." Vanessa stepped forward. "Do you really think he'll believe you over me? I've been here longer. I have friends in the accounting team. You? You're just the girl he felt guilty about." Maya didn't flinch. "You may have friends. I have evidence." Vanessa's smirk faltered. Maya stepped past her, calm but firm. "Enjoy your last shift." She didn't run. She didn't raise her voice. She walked dignified, deliberate into the marble hallway, each step echoing louder than the last. That night, she handed Calvin a sealed envelope. He opened it without a word. Photographs, receipts, the burner phone, a copy of the vendor transfer list with Vanessa's forged initials. When he finished reading, he set the papers down carefully. "You sure about this?" he asked. "Yes," Maya said. "I confronted her. She didn't deny it." Calvin sat back, thoughtful. "Then I'll handle it." "What will you do?" He looked her square in the eyes. "I'm going to make an example." The fire in his voice was back, not the cruel fire that had once accused her, but the righteous kind, the kind that protected. She nodded, then added softly, "Just don't destroy her. She still has to live in this world." He blinked at that. "Even after what she did? She didn't try to kill me. She tried to survive. The wrong way." Calvin studied her for a long moment, then said, "You really don't belong in this world, Maya." She smiled, tired but sincere. "No, Mr. Hart. I'm just trying to make it better." The dismissal happened quietly, but with surgical precision. At 8:02 a.m., Calvin called Vanessa to his office. At 8:10, she exited the east wing, her heels clicking furiously across the marble floor, face tight with fury and disbelief. By 8:30, her access badge was deactivated. No shouting, no scandal, just a signature on a termination form and a cold statement. Effective immediately. Unauthorized use of estate resources. Irreversible breach of trust. The staff buzzed, of course. Whispers floated through corridors and kitchens like campfire smoke. But no one dared say Maya's name out loud anymore. The line had been drawn, and it was clear who stood on which side. That morning, Maya stood alone in the atrium, watching rain beat against the glass dome. The garden below had bloomed wildly after the recent storm's vines curling upward like they were hungry for light. Mrs. Carroll approached with a slight smirk. She left the house like a tornado, didn't even say goodbye to her locker. "She'll land on her feet," Maya replied softly. "You're too good," Carol said, folding her arms. "Don't let that be your weakness." Maya turned. If we all stopped being kind just to protect ourselves, what kind of world would we live in? Carol paused, her stern face softening. "One where no one like you ever makes it this far." Later that week, Calvin invited Maya to join a dinner meeting with 2 nonprofit board members from New York. He offered it as an observation opportunity, but the look in his eyes told her it was something more, a public statement. "You don't have to say much," he said that afternoon as she reviewed the schedule. "Just be present." "I'm not a trophy," Maya replied with a half smile. "No," he said, "you're a witness." The evening was formal but relaxed. The guests were polished women in their 50s, deeply involved in social reform, both ex-lawyers now running education funds for underserved youth. Calvin introduced Maya as the heart of the estate. Nah. And then he listened as she explained the revised staff rotation she'd implemented, how food waste had dropped, how morale had improved. Her voice was steady, measured, but her hands, Calvin noticed, remained clenched in her lap, always bracing for rejection. It never came. By dessert, one of the guests, Helen, leaned across the table and said, "You're the kind of leader people don't see coming, Miss William. That's your power." Maya blinked, genuinely startled. I'm just doing my job." "Lee." "Exactly," Helen smiled. "And not just your job, but everyone else's that forgot how to care." But not everyone was pleased with her rising influence. Marshall Green, the investor who had challenged Calvin in the board meeting, requested an unscheduled visit to the estate. "He says it's about the new foundation proposal," Calvin told Maya in private. "But I suspect it's something else." Maya didn't hesitate. "Let him come. If he's here to see weakness, let him meet strength." The morning Marshall arrived, the entire house seemed to tighten. He was a sharp man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that never smiled. He wore wealth like armor and suspicion like a badge. He requested a tour of the entire estate and insisted Maya be the one to give it. Calvin raised a brow but said nothing. Maya obliged. They walked through the halls. She spoke clearly, confidently, explaining staff procedures, security protocols, recent upgrades. At the kitchen, Marshall finally broke his silence. "Tell me something." "Miss William." "Yes, sir." "How did a maid become the head of operations in under a year?" She didn't blink. "By not staying a maid." His lip twitched. "That easy?" "No," she said calmly. "It's never easy. But when someone opens a door, you walk through it." He nodded once. "And what if that door was opened for the wrong reasons? Guilt, maybe. Pity." Maya looked him dead in the eyes. "Then you walk through it anyway, because the reason it opened doesn't matter. What matters is what you build on the other side." Silence. Marshall looked away. "I see." Later that evening, Calvin joined him in the study. They exchanged pleasantries over bourbon before Marshall finally said, "She's impressive. Still green, but sharp." Calvin smiled. "She reminds me of someone I used to know." Marshall sipped his drink. "Just make sure the world doesn't eat her alive." "I won't let it." Marshall paused. "Good, because when you back someone like that, you're not just giving them a job, you're giving them a target." That night, Maya sat on the small balcony off the guest suite, staring out at the misty lawn. Her phone buzzed with a photo from the hospital. Her mother, sitting up in bed, smiling weakly with a thumbs up. Caption: Doc says I'm stubborn. I told him I learned it from you. Maya laughed quietly, covering her mouth. She didn't hear the footsteps behind her. Calvin appeared, holding 2 cups of tea. Figured you might want something warm. She took the cup, eyes soft. Thanks. They sat in silence for a moment, sipping. Today was a good day, she said finally. It was, he agreed. She looked over at him. Do you think it'll last? He didn't answer right away. Then, only if we make it. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. The stars were just beginning to pierce through the clouds above. 3 weeks passed. The estate ran smoother than ever, schedules aligned. Supplies were always accounted for. Calvin noticed even the smallest shifts, fewer complaints, cleaner reports, better air, and yet Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen was stirring. Not in the walls, but in the people. Behind every smile lingered a pause, a brief moment of restraint. At first, she thought she was imagining it, but when John, the gardener, stopped her one afternoon and said, "Be careful who you trust, Miss William," she knew it wasn't just paranoia. Calvin had told her once, people are fine with you winning until you're standing on something they thought they owned. She was standing on respect now. And not everyone liked that. Still, she did what she had always done. Keep moving, keep working, keep watching. One Friday afternoon, while reviewing vendor contracts in the estate office, Maya found something odd. The foundation's discretionary spending report included a $12,000 consulting fee sent to an unfamiliar firm, Glaskey Advisors. She flipped back through the past 3 months, same name, recurring payments, slightly different amounts. She checked the estate vendor logs. Glaskey wasn't registered. She checked the public records. Glaskey Advisors was a shell company, registered to a P.O. box in Delaware. Her heart slowed. Someone was moving money out of the foundation. Illegally. She didn't run to Calvin, not yet. Instead, she dug further, cross-referenced expense reports. Found a signature tied to the authorizations. It wasn't Calvin's. It was Green's. Marshall Green, the investor with a polished tongue and a politician's smile. That evening, Maya stood on the terrace outside the dining room, phone in hand, trying to process the weight of what she'd found. It was a different kind of storm now, one not aimed at her directly, but threatening everything she stood on. She had just begun to feel stable. She had just learned how to stand tall again. And now, a house with a cracked foundation would eventually fall. She didn't hear Calvin approach. "You okay?" he asked, voice lower than usual. She turned to him slowly. "How long have you trusted Marshall Green?" Calvin's brows lifted. 20 years. He helped fund my second major property flip. Why? She didn't answer. Instead, she held up her tablet, pulled up the reports, and handed it to him. He scrolled in silence. His jaw tightened with each line. His eyes didn't blink. When he finished, he handed it back and walked a few steps away, hands on his hips. Maya waited. Finally, he said, "This could destroy everything. Then we get ahead of it." He turned to her. "You realize what you've uncovered isn't just embezzlement. If this goes public, every donation we've received could be called into question. Every project." "I know," she said. "But if we don't stop it, we're complicit." He stared at her. "I can't protect him," he said quietly. "Not anymore." Maya took a step closer. "Then don't. Protect the truth instead." The next morning, Calvin made a call to his legal team. By noon, he had a full audit underway. He didn't mention Maya's name once, not in meetings, not in memos, but everyone knew where the thread began. 2 days later, the legal team confirmed her findings and more. Shell companies, misappropriated funds, bribes tied to minor city officials. Marshall Green had turned Calvin's philanthropic foundation into a laundering tool for nearly 4 years. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a declaration of war. The confrontation took place in Calvin's private study. Marshall entered, unsuspecting. Calvin stood behind his desk, the audit files already open. "I know," he said simply. Marshall didn't blink. "Know what? Don't insult me." Marshall glanced at the papers, then smiled. "You wouldn't be here without me. Don't forget who helped you climb." "You think loyalty means blindness?" "I think loyalty should mean leverage," Green said, voice tightening. You make this public, and I'll make damn sure every reporter knows your foundation's money helped fund questionable projects. You mean your projects? Calvin said, stepping forward. You think I'm afraid of losing investors? Of bad press? I've lost more than that in 1 year and rebuilt it all. You won't survive this scandal. Maybe not, Calvin's voice dropped, but I won't let it rot everything I've built just to keep your hands clean. Green's face darkened. Calvin pointed to the door. You have until Monday to resign from all boards and dissolve Glasskey. If not, I'll go public, and I promise, I'll bury you in paperwork so deep, you'll wish you'd stolen less. Marshall stared at him, then nodded once and left without another word. That evening, Calvin found Maya outside, trimming the dead branches from the rose bushes. You were right, he said quietly. The foundation was bleeding. I just couldn't see it. She didn't look up. You weren't supposed to. People like him are good at being invisible. I've terminated every contract tied to Green, he said. The board's being restructured, and I want you on it. Maya dropped the shears. Me? She said, stunned. You uncovered this. You saved the foundation. You have more integrity in your pinky finger than most of the men I've worked with in 20 years. She shook her head slowly. I don't know if I'm qualified. You are, he said, because you care more about what's right than what's convenient. She was silent for a long time. Then, if I say yes, we do it my way. He smiled. I wouldn't want it any other way. Later that night, Maya stood by the kitchen window, phone in hand, speaking softly. Yes, Mama, I'll be on a board. No, not that kind of board. Not rich ladies and wine real work. Her mother laughed on the other end. Told you, baby. Stubborn gets you places. Maya laughed too, looking out at the moonlight on the wet stones of the courtyard. I'm not just surviving anymore, she said quietly. I think I'm becoming something more. The boardroom at Hart Estates was no longer just a polished symbol of power. After Maya's appointment, it transformed into something else entirely, a space for accountability. The long mahogany table, once filled with self-assured men and women nodding through reports, now had a new energy pulsing through it. Her nameplate was simple. Maya William, Director of Ethical Oversight. It sat between two legacy seats, both held by board members who had initially questioned her presence. She felt their glances, the weight of their decades. But Maya didn't flinch. She knew her place wasn't given. It had been earned, brick by brick, through blood, silence, bruises, and truth. Calvin opened the meeting. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge something, he said, hands folded calmly. A failure of mine. The room quieted. For years, I allowed systems to function on trust without verification, and someone used that trust to poison the very thing we claim to protect. He paused. That won't happen again. Maya William exposed the breach. Without her, we would still be bleeding. Some nodded. Others remained still, stone-like. Maya didn't need their applause. She needed their attention. After the meeting, Calvin caught up with her in the hallway. You did well, he said. Strong voice. Clear points. No fear. I was afraid, Maya said. I just didn't let it speak for me. He smiled. That's what makes a leader. They paused outside the elevator. He added, the media will eventually catch wind of all this. You know that, right? She nodded. Then let them come. His gaze met hers, not with challenge but with admiration, and a quiet gratitude. Let's get ahead of the narrative, he said. Tell our story on our terms. Not our story, she corrected gently. The story, one that shows how institutions can course correct if someone's willing to speak. 2 weeks later, an exclusive article broke in The Atlantic. The headline was simple but powerful. The maid who stopped $1 million fraud. The journalist had spoken to Maya over 2 long conversations, one in her office, one during a walk through the estate gardens. She had been hesitant at first, unsure about being reduced to headlines. But the writer, a black woman in her 50s named Ava Callan, had reassured her. I'm not here to tell your story, she'd said. I'm here to protect it. The article was balanced. It laid out the fraud, the silence, the courage. It mentioned her promotion not as charity, but as justice. And it ended with one striking quote from Maya. No one gave me a voice. I just stopped whispering. The day after publication, Maya walked into the estate dining hall to polite clapping. It wasn't loud or showy, just acknowledgement. Even some of her critics softened. But not everyone was celebrating. That afternoon, a letter was slipped under her door. No return address, just 2 words. Stay quiet. Maya read it once, then crumpled it. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she walked it straight to Calvin's office. He opened the letter, his jaw tightened. "Cowards," he muttered. "We expected this," Maya said. "You shine a light, and rats scurry." I'll have the security team investigate." "No," she interrupted. "Don't give them the fear they want. I'm not scared. I won't be moved by shadows anymore." He studied her, proud and cautious all at once. "You've changed," he said. "No," she corrected. "I've just remembered who I used to be, before I had to hide." That weekend, Calvin invited her to a formal benefit gala downtown. It was hosted by a civil rights coalition focused on workplace equity and inclusion. She hesitated at first. "Those rooms don't feel safe for people like me," she admitted. "Then maybe you need to be the reason they start feeling that way," he replied. She wore a simple but elegant navy dress, her hair pulled back in a tight twist. Calvin met her at the bottom of the mansion steps, adjusting his cufflinks. "You look," he began, then paused, "like you belong at the head of any table." She smiled, one that held both pride and steel. "Let's go shake the walls, then." "No." At the gala, murmurs followed her like a soft storm. The article had made waves in the upper circles. Her name was now spoken in the same sentence as accountability and courage, but some still looked at her with skepticism, as if waiting for her to stumble. She didn't. She stood on stage beside Calvin as he presented a new initiative. The Heart Integrity Fund. A $10 million commitment to whistleblower protection programs, employee rights, education, and diversity leadership training. He stepped back, and Maya approached the podium. For a heartbeat, she froze, not from fear, but from the weight of how far she'd come. Then she spoke. "I didn't grow up believing someone like me would ever be heard. But injustice doesn't care about your background. It knocks anyway. And sometimes, it kicks the door in." The audience fell into a hush. She continued, voice unwavering. "So we need to build spaces where the truth doesn't have to scream to be believed. We need to stop rewarding silence. And we need to teach the next generation that survival isn't the finish line, justice is." Applause followed, not polite, but powerful. And in that moment, she didn't feel like a maid. She felt like a builder, a changer of rooms, a keeper of light. It was nearing dusk when the email came in. Maya was reviewing the security camera upgrade proposal in her new office when her inbox pinged. The subject line was vague, re-internal policy review, but the attachment was chilling. A scanned document, a maintenance log. Date, 8 years ago. Entry, West Wing storage vault contents removed per directive from CH for disposal. Signature, not Calvin's. It belonged to Gregory Brandt. Gregory had been the former chief of staff, long since retired after a quiet settlement. No press, no fuss. He had left the estate a year before Maya ever arrived. And no one spoke much about him. But the vault, the West Wing, had been sealed for as long as she could remember. And nothing about it had ever come up in inventories, audits, or walkthroughs. Why would an entire wing be sealed off without record? She walked to the executive archive room and checked the floor plans herself. The vault was still listed. She picked up her phone. "Mr. Hart," she said, trying to keep her voice even, "do you have a few minutes?" The West Wing of Hart Estate had always felt colder. It wasn't abandoned, more like forgotten. A hallway no one bothered to clean because no one had reason to walk through it. But now, as Maya and Calvin approached the double doors, a thin layer of dust coated the baseboards. The security lock blinked red. "I didn't even know this was still powered," Calvin muttered, punching in his master code. The doors clicked. They stepped inside. At first, it was just boxes. Stacks of old estate files, furniture, rusted filing cabinets, the smell of wood rot and leather. But in the back, half covered by a sheet, was a locked steel cabinet, the kind used by lawyers, or by people who wanted to keep things hidden. Calvin pulled the covering away. "This isn't mine," he said flatly. Maya stepped closer. "That's Gregory's signature on the disposal order, but there's no record of what was removed." Calvin didn't hesitate. Get the crowbar. 10 minutes later, the cabinet creaked open. Inside were stacks of documents, photographs, and a dusty camcorder wrapped in plastic. Maya picked up one of the manila folders. Her hands trembled. It was full of employment applications. Dozens of them, from black and brown applicants, dated back over 10 years. Everyone stamped, rejected, overqualified. Some had red pen scribbles. To work on, will make others uncomfortable. Not suitable for Heart brand. Calvin's face darkened. This was never supposed to happen. Nah. Maya looked at him, something hard forming in her chest. But it did. She pulled out another folder, this one marked Incident. Inside was a printed complaint letter from a former maid, addressed to the Hart Estate Office of Ethics, describing sexual harassment by Gregory Brandt. The complaint had been signed, dated, and then never sent. At the bottom, resolved internally. Maya felt like the room had tilted sideways. All these years, all these silences. Mr. Hart, she said slowly, this house, this name, it's standing on more than just your mistakes. It's standing on buried harm. He didn't argue. He didn't deny. He simply closed his eyes, jaw tight, and said, then we dig it all out. That night, Calvin called an emergency meeting with the estate's legal team. This can't be buried, he said. I want a full investigation. I want transparency. And I want the victims, if we can find them, to receive reparations, quiet or public. Their choice. His lawyers pushed back. This opens you up to lawsuits. I don't care, he said. We already opened the door. Now we walk through it. He turned to Maya. You lead this. Every file. Every name. No redactions. Maya nodded once. Understood. Over the following week, Maya didn't sleep much. She combed through every document, every photo, every letter. She cataloged names, cross-referenced resignation dates, looked for current addresses. She called people, some of whom refused to talk, but others wept. I thought I imagined it, one former maid told her. I thought I was just too sensitive. No, Maya replied. You were silenced. Some were hesitant to come forward. But a few agreed to speak with the internal ethics review board Calvin commissioned. For the first time, the house that had hidden so much began to breathe. The press caught on. The article from The Atlantic had already made Maya a public figure. But this new development took it further. Hart Estate opens internal investigation into past racial discrimination and harassment cover-ups. Some headlines painted Calvin as a reformer. Others questioned how much he had known all along. Calvin didn't issue a public statement. Instead, he let Maya speak. At a televised panel organized by a workplace justice group, she said, uncovering the truth isn't about assigning blame. It's about restoring dignity. This isn't a story about a maid who made it to the top. This is about a system that nearly crushed her and her decision not to let it continue. Back at the estate, the staff watched the panel replay in the break room. No one said a word. Then John, the gardener, stood up and muttered, "Damn right." Mrs. Carroll raised her mug in a silent toast. And in that quiet way revolutions often begin, a culture shifted. Not because Maya had demanded respect, but because she had insisted on the truth. Calvin sat alone in his study, a soft jazz record spinning in the background. His glass of scotch remained untouched, sweating onto the mahogany desk as the night deepened. He stared not at the fire, but at the photo in his hand, an old estate Christmas party from 12 years ago. There, in the corner, barely visible, was Gregory Brandt. He remembered the night, remembered laughing, remembered the board members praising the year's profit margin. He didn't remember Gregory leaving early, or the young woman who never showed up again after that evening. The truth wasn't just in the vault. It was in his memory, fragmented and vague, but present, and it haunted him. Elsewhere in the estate, Maya sat on the edge of her bed, laptop open, reviewing testimony transcripts. Her eyes were heavy, but she didn't stop. Names blurred into stories. Stories blurred into pain. One woman, a former dishwasher named Rita, had submitted her statement anonymously but allowed Maya to quote her. We didn't speak up because we needed the job. It wasn't just fear, it was survival. There's no HR when you clean floors. Maya typed the words into the estate's internal newsletter. A new column she'd created. voices unheard. Each week, she would share anonymized accounts from the past, not for pity, not for scandal, for truth. The next morning, the mood on the estate was unusually still. It wasn't fear, it was reflection. Maya walked through the halls, nodding at staff who, just a month ago, had barely acknowledged her. Now they looked her in the eye. Some even stopped her to say, "Thank you." Mrs. Carroll approached her outside the greenhouse with a steaming mug of herbal tea. "Don't forget to rest," she said, voice gentle. "Fighting ghosts will drain the living out of you." Maya smiled faintly. "I'll rest when the names are cleared." Carroll sighed, pressing the mug into her hand. "Just don't burn yourself doing what others should have done a long time ago." That evening, Calvin invited Maya to a private dinner. Not in the formal dining room, but in the back garden, under a string of Edison bulbs and beside the small fire pit. She arrived in a gray coat, hair pulled into a bun, files still in her arms. He raised a brow. "No work tonight." I don't know how to sit still anymore," she admitted. "I know the feeling," he said. They ate in silence for a while, roasted chicken, asparagus, and a peach cobbler that Maya suspected Carol had secretly prepared. Finally, Calvin spoke. "Do you think forgiveness is always possible?" Maya looked up slowly. "I think justice has to come first," she said. "Forgiveness isn't a shortcut. It's something that's earned over time." He nodded. "I've lived so long thinking as long as I didn't cause harm, I wasn't responsible for it. But silence is a kind of harm," Maya replied softly. Calvin didn't defend himself. He just said, "I'm learning." She set her fork down. "You're doing more than that. You're choosing to change. That's rare, especially in people with power." He looked at her with a quiet intensity. "You could have left." "I thought about it," she said honestly. "After the sandwich, after the screaming, after you threw that glass at me." The words hung in the air like a challenge. He lowered his head. "I'll never forgive myself for that." She held his gaze. "Then don't ask me to. Just make sure it never happens again to anyone." He nodded slowly. "That, I can promise." 2 days later, Maya received an envelope in the estate's internal mail. No return address. Inside, a single sentence handwritten on thick cardstock. "It's not over." No signature, no context. She read it 3 times, heart thudding. Then slowly, she stood and locked her office door. Calvin's security team did a full sweep. The cameras showed no unauthorized entry, no fingerprints. But Maya knew what this was. Someone wasn't afraid of the past being revealed. They were afraid of what she might uncover next. And they were right to be, because Maya had found a second vault, not in the estate but in the Foundation's downtown office. A secondary archive, unopened since the nonprofit's relocation. She and Calvin made the drive together that Friday afternoon, quiet music playing on the radio. The city lights shimmered through the windshield as they pulled into the underground garage. Inside the archive, dust hung like fog in the air. Most of the boxes were labeled and sorted, but in the far corner behind an unused copier and stacks of unopened banners was a crate with no label at all. Inside were financial ledgers, years of handwritten notes, donation logs, and matching fund entries. Many were legitimate. But then they found a series of entries marked cash in, kind, unknown source. Dates, 2014, 2017. Amounts, small, regular, untraceable. Calvin looked at the entries, face pale. "I thought we stopped taking cash donations a decade ago." Maya ran her finger along the ledger line. Then someone didn't get the memo. She flipped to the back of the book and found something that made her heart stop. An account code she recognized. It was connected to the very first estate she'd cleaned after arriving in New York. A property owned by Gregory Brandt's brother. Her hands trembled. This goes deeper," she said. "It's not just fraud. It's laundering." Calvin took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing. "This isn't just about us anymore." Back at the estate, as night fell, Maya stood in her room looking out at the endless lawn. A storm gathered over the hills, lightning illuminating the far tree line. But she wasn't afraid. She was ready, because now she knew the fight wasn't just about what happened before. It was about what they were willing to uncover next. The storm broke around midnight. Thunder cracked over the estate as if the sky itself was tearing open. Rain slammed the windows, and power flickered once, then held steady. Maya lay in bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep was out of the question. Her phone buzzed an encrypted message from a former staffer she'd contacted just days earlier. "I found something. You were right. Meet me tomorrow. Alone. No name, no location yet." But it was enough. Maya sat up, heart pounding. Every day the puzzle got bigger, and every piece led back to the same circle of men who'd operated in the shadows of Hart's empire. Men like Gregory Brandt, and those who enabled him. She had uncovered the first layer, but there were deeper currents now. This wasn't just about ethics violations. It was a criminal network. Legacy corruption, wrapped in charitable branding, and housed inside marble walls. And somehow, Calvin had never seen it. Or maybe he had, but in pieces too small to name. The next morning, Maya briefed Calvin in his office. He listened in silence, seated behind his desk in a gray button-down and no tie. His eyes didn't leave hers. "So we meet this contact," he said. "You're not going alone." "She said I should," Maya replied. Calvin's brow furrowed. "Then I'll be nearby. In the car. Watching." Maya hesitated, then nodded. "Okay. But let me take the first step. If she smells intimidation, she'll vanish." Calvin leaned forward. "Maya, you don't have to be the one carrying this entire thing." "Yes," she said, "I do. Not out of pride, but purpose. Because once upon a time, she was the one no one listened to. Now, people were whispering to her, trusting her to make it right. She wouldn't betray that." The contact chose an old diner on the outskirts of Yonkers, just beyond the city, where no one asked questions and no one looked twice. Maya walked in at 10:06 a.m., wearing jeans and a hoodie beneath her coat. She took a booth facing the door. Calvin sat in the black SUV 2 blocks down, phone in hand. At 10:12, a woman entered. White, mid-50 seconds, gray-streaked hair tied back. Her eyes darted once around the room, then landed on Maya. She sat opposite without a word. "I'm Maya William." "I know who you are," the woman said. "I used to clean offices at the Downtown Foundation." Maya's heart skipped. "You were a janitor?" The woman nodded. "For 6 years, I saw everything. I kept receipts. They didn't think I could read the logs, but I could. I just couldn't say anything, not without losing the only paycheck keeping my grandson alive." "Do." She slid a flash drive across the table. "I've been collecting this for a while," she said. Scanned papers, names, wire transfer logs, including notes Gregory sent between properties. They used nonprofits as a front. Money in, money out. Some of it tied to real estate flips. Others, she shook her head, worse. Maya's stomach tightened. How worse? There were Shell grants issued to ghost schools, clinics that didn't exist, overseas donations that never arrived. Maya's throat went dry. Are there victims? Lots. Especially in low-income communities. And if you dig further, you'll find some of them were promised jobs, internships, even housing. All lies. Maya took the flash drive, her hands ice cold. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come forward?" The woman's voice trembled. "Because I saw what they did to you. You stood up. You didn't go quiet. And that gave me hope. Someone like you, doing what you're doing." Her voice cracked. "I thought, maybe it's time." Maya reached across the table, laid her hand on hers. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're not alone anymore." Back at the estate, Maya plugged the drive into a secured offline computer in Calvin's study. He sat beside her, both of them in stunned silence, as they watched the documents unfold. Transfers, names, receipts, even internal memos with initials tying Gregory and others to offshore accounts. "This is organized crime," Calvin said flatly. "Yes," Maya agreed, "and it's sitting on top of a charity brand people trust." He stood and paced the room. "We'll need the FBI, a forensic accountant, maybe even a federal prosecutor." Maya's eyes flicked to him. "You're willing to go that far?" He turned to her. "If I don't, then I'm no different than the ones who looked away." That night, the two of them met with a lawyer named Thomas Rayburn, an ex-DOJ investigator turned whistleblower advocate. He was skeptical at first, until he saw the flash drive's contents. His demeanor changed instantly. "You'll need to prepare for retaliation," he warned. "Once we file this, it won't stay quiet. These men have reach, political ties, maybe even international assets." Maya nodded. "I'm ready." Thomas raised a brow. "You've done this before?" "No," Maya replied, "but I've survived worse." He smiled faintly. "Then you're the best person for this." "No." Calvin said little during the meeting, but when Thomas left, he turned to Maya. "I thought I was building something untouchable," he said, "but all I did was lay clean stone over a rotting foundation." Maya shook her head. "You didn't build the rot. You just inherited it." Calvin sat down. "And now?" "Now," Maya said softly, "we burn it clean." Later that evening, Maya walked the estate grounds alone. The wind had calmed, the trees still. Lights flickered in the distance where the security team patrolled. She paused near the old vault door, the one where this had all begun. So many years, so many silences, so many closed doors. But she had opened this one, and she would keep opening more. Because somewhere out there were people still being used, lied to, stolen from, and she was no longer just Maya the maid. She was Maya the witness, Maya the reckoning, Maya the storm walking through the halls. The official whistleblower complaint was filed at 9:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. It was discreet, handled through encrypted submission portals with oversight from Thomas Rayburn's firm. The drive's contents were uploaded to a federal crimes division specializing in nonprofit fraud and laundering. Maya signed her name to the affidavit without trembling. When it was done, she sat back in Calvin's office, hands folded tightly in her lap. "Now we wait," Thomas had said, "and prepare." But waiting wasn't silence. It was the pause before a landslide. Within 48 hours, the Department of Justice sent a preliminary acknowledgement. An agent had been assigned. Maya's identity as the whistleblower was protected on paper, but power had its own eyes and ears. By Friday, Maya's apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen. Only her photographs were flipped over, the curtains left wide open, her old nursing textbooks scattered. A message. She stood in the doorway, fists clenched. Calvin arrived 10 minutes later with 2 of his private security guards. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He said, "We lock everything down now." Maya didn't argue. That same night, she moved into one of the estate's guest suites on the 3rd floor closer to staff, farther from Calvin's office. She insisted on it. She needed distance, clarity. She wasn't going to be seen as his pet project, or worse, his protection. She was here on her own merit, and she would fight on her own feet. At breakfast, the staff buzzed, not about Maya's move but about the news. A local paper had published a vague but damning article. Hart Foundation faces scrutiny for past mismanagement. It named no one, but those in the estate knew who it pointed toward. Some staff looked at Maya with reverence, others with resentment. "You're either fixing the place," one of the junior chefs said, "or burning it to the ground." Maya simply replied, "Sometimes you can't do one without the other." A week later, the DOJ requested an in-person interview.